Thank you for watching. I'm Shakil 5858. I'm Amir Budnam. The news by the world channels. GMT 700 March 9, 20. EU ship with food for Gaza from Cyprus. Port at Gaza by Americans. Hungary Prime Minister didn't meet Biden. France abortion law. UN report on Iran. Women's Day celebrations. 30,000 immigrants every day. Dragon Ball creator died. Honduran president guilty. US government shut down. The economies worry Americans. Hungary Prime Minister met Trump. Biden on campaign trail. $92 million bond by Trump. Employment rate goes down in USA. Wall Street down. I am thankful to all news resources. Now the news in detail.
Hour tonight, the Senate races to pass a spending package and avoid a government shutdown.
Why many Americans say they're unhappy about the state of the economy, even though indicators say it's improving.
When you tell them that things are getting cheaper, but their rent is not getting cheaper, and their food is not getting cheaper, of course they're going to feel bad.
And Hungary's far-right Prime Minister Viktor Orban visits the United States, meeting former President Trump, but not President Biden.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided. Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour. President Biden is on the road tonight, hoping to build momentum for his re-election after last night's State of the Union address.
First stop this afternoon was Philadelphia. His campaign said it's the start of a sweep through the major swing states. The president told supporters he is ready to take the fight to former President Trump. Tomorrow, he heads south for a campaign appearance in Atlanta. Former President Trump has posted a $92 million bond to cover a defamation judgment in New York. That filing today lets him put off actually paying the penalty while he appeals. A jury found he sexually abused the writer E. Jean Carroll in 1996 and then falsely accused her of lying about it. The former president also consolidated his grip on the Republican Party as its national committee approved his leadership team. North Carolina Party Chair Michael Whatley was voted in as RNC chair. Mr. Trump's daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, will become the national co-chair. The Trump team has promised not to use RNC funds to pay his legal bills. The nation's jobs market put up healthy numbers in February. The Labor Department reports that employers added a net of 275,000 positions. That's up nearly 50,000 from January. At the same time, the unemployment rate hit 3.9% as more people began looking for work. And hourly wages had their smallest gain in more than 2 years, which could help lower inflation further. Efforts to get humanitarian aid into Gaza intensified today. The European Union announced a ship loaded with supplies could arrive this weekend. The vessel will sail from Cyprus in a pilot operation for a maritime corridor extending more than 200 nautical miles. Today, the European Commission's President, Ursula von der Leyen, inspected preparations at Larnaca in Cyprus. She said it's critical to act now.
The humanitarian situation in Gaza is dire, with innocent Palestinian families and children desperate for basic needs. This is why Europe is financing a major humanitarian aid effort for Palestinians in Gaza and in the region.
President Biden announced plans last night to build a temporary pier to move more aid into Gaza. The Pentagon said today it will take several weeks to get the facility up and running. A UN report blamed Iran today for crimes against humanity in the death of Mahsa Amini and the unrest it sparked in 2022. The investigation found physical violence led to Amini's death for allegedly violating rules on wearing headscarves. Nationwide protests erupted as thousands surged into the streets. The report found the ensuing crackdown used everything from shotguns to sexual assaults. More than 500 people were killed. Today's International Women's Day was marked by celebrations and calls to action. Supporters of women's rights in Spain and across Europe rallied for gender equality, and women in Afghanistan staged a rare protest against Taliban restrictions. Rallygoers in Turkey demanded basic rights.
The pressure on women is not just physical. It is psychological, economic, even digital. We are fighting against all kinds of violence. We still have not gained equal labor and wage rights. We do not have our freedom in this country.
In France, supporters marked the day by formally inscribing the right to abortion into its constitution after lawmakers approved that on Monday. The Biden administration won around today in a legal fight over immigration. A federal judge in Texas upheld a program to admit 30,000 migrants a month from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela on humanitarian grounds. Texas and 20 other states argued it's an economic burden on them. They are expected to appeal. A federal jury in New York has convicted the former president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez, of helping to funnel tons of cocaine into the U.S. The verdict came 2 years after Hernandez was extradited to the U.S. Prosecutors said he took millions of dollars in bribes from drug traffickers. He could get life in prison when he's sentenced in June. The U.S. military has cleared its workhorse Osprey aircraft to return to duty. The entire fleet of several hundred Ospreys was grounded in December after a fatal crash in Japan. The Osprey hovers like a helicopter and flies like a plane, but it's had a history of deadly crashes. Officials say they are imposing new safety measures. On Wall Street, stocks pulled back as shares in the high-flying chipmaker Nvidia took a tumble. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 68 points to close at 38,722. The Nasdaq fell 188 points. The S&P 500 dropped 33. And a passing of note. The Japanese anime artist who created the hugely popular Dragon Ball has died after suffering a cerebral blood clot. Akira Toriyama began the Dragon Ball manga or comic series in 1984. It grew into video games, films, and television adaptations and heavily influenced Japanese anime. Akira Toriyama was 68 years old. Still to come on the NewsHour, David Brooks and Jonathan Capehart weigh in on the week's political headlines. The sound designer of The Zone of Interest discusses his Oscar-nominated work on the film, plus much more.
This is the PBS NewsHour from WETA Studios in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
Today's latest jobs report is proof again of a labor market that has been resilient and often stronger than expected. That was part of President Biden's message during his State of the Union last night as well. But many Americans don't feel the economy is strong overall or helping them or their families. A number of polls have shown this, including one from the New York Times this week that found 51% of Americans believe the country's economic conditions are poor right now. So why the disconnect? Economics correspondent Paul Salman explains.
I think if you talk to average person on the street, they're going to say that
statistically good economy for many, but for more than a few Americans, bad economic vibe. For the PBS NewsHour, Paul Salman.
Funding the government is down to the wire. Senate lawmakers are cutting this close, running up a midnight deadline to pass a major spending bill and prevent a partial government shutdown. Lisa Desjardins has been following the latest. So Lisa, here we are again, friend, on the brink of another federal government shutdown. The most pressing question, are they going to get this done?
Let's take a look at our U.S. Senate floor right now, shall we? Here's what lawmakers are doing who don't usually meet on foot. We will see. So we'll be back here talking about it.
All right, Lisa Desjardins, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban is meeting with former President Donald Trump today after a visit to Washington yesterday, where he met with no one from the Biden administration. Orban delayed both European aid to Ukraine and Sweden's bid to join NATO. Nick Schifrin examines Orban's relationship with global conservatives and why he's resisted some of the Biden administration's top priorities in Europe.
From Turkey to Texas.
My country, Hungary, is the lone star state of Europe.
Whether any of that recipe is served up in the U.S. could hinge on the November election. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Nick Schifrin.
An impassioned State of the Union address by President Biden served as an unofficial kickoff to the general election. On that and what lies ahead in the race for the White House, we turn now to the analysis of Brooks and Capehart. That is New York Times columnist David Brooks and Jonathan Capehart, associate editor for The Washington Post. Great to see you both as always. Jonathan, thank you for joining us from Philadelphia, where we know the president is appearing today. Let's talk about...
It's going to hurt Biden more than it's going to hurt Trump, and I guess I still believe that.
We'll see. David Brooks, Jonathan Capehart, always great to see you both. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tom. The Academy Awards are being held in Los Angeles Sunday. Oppenheimer is getting much of the buzz, but there's also excitement surrounding a film called The Zone of Interest, with its remarkable soundscape evoking the worst of the Holocaust. Special correspondent Malcolm Brabant visited Oscar-nominated sound designer Johnny Byrne at his studio as part of our arts and culture series, Canvas.
At an art cinema in southern England, 5,500 miles from Hollywood, the audience is preparing to be assailed by the sonic genius of Johnny Byrne.
I can't say I hope you enjoy it, because that might not be the right word, but I hope you appreciate it.
Zone of Interest chronicles the mundane existence of a Nazi family living next to Auschwitz, while more than 1 million people are being murdered just over the Garden Wall. Whether the Academy feels the same way. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Malcolm Brabant in Brighton.
And we'll be back shortly, but first take a moment to hear from your local PBS station.
It's a chance to offer your support, which helps to keep programs like the NewsHour on the air. For those of you staying with us, the band The Goo Goo Dolls is on tour again, playing favorites and some new songs, all while celebrating the 25th anniversary of their breakthrough album, Dizzy Up the Girl. In this encore feature, I spoke with the lead band members about innovating while preserving their classic sound.
And I give up forever to touch you, 'cause I know that you feel so bad.
Online right now, our digital PBS News Weekly show looks back at a big week in politics, from a contentious election season to President Biden's State of the Union address. That's on our YouTube page. And be sure to tune into Washington Week with The Atlantic tonight on PBS. Moderator Jeffrey Goldberg and his panel discuss the president's fiery State of the Union address and the 2024 presidential rematch.
And on PBS News Weekend, as former President Trump cements his hold on the GOP, we look at the future of the Republican Party. And that is the NewsHour for tonight. I'm Amna Navaz.
And I'm Jeff Bennett. Have a good evening and a great weekend.
Major funding for the PBS
On this Friday night, exclusive details about an accused mass murderer.
Never had any issues growing up.
What we're learning about the Ottawa family killed and the lone survivor's connection to the suspect. Funding controversy. Ottawa resumes its support for the UN's relief agency in Gaza. The clock is ticking for TikTok.
And if I lose this, I literally will not be able to pay my rent.
The American ultimatum for the app's Chinese owners. Plus, the power of representation.
Take time to listen.
The indigenous movie makers breaking barriers and stereotypes.
Global National with Paranasa. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We're getting our first look tonight at the 5 family members killed in a horrific attack on an Ottawa home. Darshini Akenaika and her 4 children, the youngest just 2 months old, were killed Wednesday in the suburb of Barhaven. The children's father remains in hospital with serious injuries. A family friend was also killed. All were recent newcomers to Canada. A suspect is in custody, and tonight we're learning more from his aunt in an exclusive interview. Mackenzie Gray has the details and a warning that some of them are disturbing.
This is 19-year-old Fabio de Souza, who police allege killed 6 people he lived with Wednesday night. And in an exclusive interview with Global News, his aunt, an Ottawa resident of 18 years, couldn't fathom how this happened.
Quiet, like never violent, never had any issues growing up. He was like so pampered boy.
The accused lived with his aunt briefly in Ottawa when he arrived 2 years ago on an international student visa, but quickly moved out, and then a year later, removed his aunt's family completely from his life.
He stopped contacting us. He blocked us, our phone numbers, social media. Everything was blocked. We were blocked from his life.
While studying at Algonquin College, de Souza met Danushka Vikramasinghe, the father and husband to 5 of the dead, and the only survivor of de Souza's alleged attack. The pair had previously lived together and became roommates again in the past few months, according to a monk who knows the family.
Middle finger gone, and the other one is repaired, and some injuries back and front, and also on the face, close to nose and the ear. Eyes, he's a big cut.
Despite allegedly murdering his entire family and leaving him seriously injured, Vikramasinghe told a friend in hospital after undergoing surgery on Friday that he hopes a compassionate view can be taken towards the accused.
Because he was saying things like, yeah, my life is in shambles, but, the person that committed the crime is a young boy too, and, let's think about him as well too.
Vikramasinghe arrived in Canada roughly 2.5 years ago from Sri Lanka without his now deceased wife and children. They joined him in the summer of 2023 at their suburban Ottawa home. But in an interview with Global News, the property owner said he had no idea the accused was living with them. Neither did their next door neighbor, who called 911 after the injured father banged on her door.
And they've been nothing but lovely, super quiet, hardworking, really kind people.
A sentiment echoed by the accused aunt.
Too, they were like such a wonderful family. They treated him better than us, basically. It could have been my family. In that situation, it could have been.
Even with all the new information, Jeff, one thing's still not clear: a motive, and why someone would allegedly kill 6 people, including a 2-month-old.
Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa. Thanks, Mac. On the heels of our Global News investigation into Ontario's group home industry, we're learning new details now about problems in Manitoba. That province is investigating a group home where teens were given marijuana as a means of harm reduction. Some are pointing the finger at the government and citing a lack of support for high-needs youth. Melissa Ridgen reports.
Manitoba has Canada's highest percent of kids in government care, around 10,000 at any given time. The bill to taxpayers, more than $500 million a year. But advocates say what's missing is resources for kids dealing with mental health and addictions. And that has led some caregivers, like group home Spirit Rising House, to get creative with how they minimize the risk of kids seeking harder drugs.
I think their approach, of harm reduction by taking that into their own hands was quite concerning.
But she says it's happening across the child welfare system. The province says it's investigating Spirit Rising House that runs 13 group homes housing 30 kids in Winnipeg.
You're talking about some of the young people with the highest needs in Manitoba who are being treated in an inappropriate way and who deserve far better. So I fully support our Minister of Families, who took immediate action in that instance to cut ties with the organization in question.
Parents of a 17-year-old girl in the group home who has battled hard drugs since age 12 disagree.
They can hand out clean needles on the streets and hand out Narcan, but it's not okay to give a kid pot, which I know that doesn't do any damage to anybody. It's saving my daughter's life.
The Manitoba Children's Advocate says successive NDP and Conservative governments have seen more kids taken into government care than the system can handle, and lacks a strategy for the highest needs kids. Spirit Rising House tells Global News it feels like a political lamb at slaughter. The company started 3 years ago under the previous Conservative government.
We were asked over and over to open new resources, put ourselves into a deficit, into personal debt to open more homes.
The new NDP government now wants to shut it down.
So closing down Spirit Rising House is not going to solve any of the problems.
Many parents agree.
It's a good place, and I absolutely love and respect all those workers at Spirit Rising.
Yeah, change the rules, don't take away the placement. They're doing a great job.
Parents and support workers tell Global News the possibility of the province shutting down Spirit House Rising is having a destabilizing effect on these vulnerable youth, the fate of their home now in the hands of politicians. Melissa Ridgen, Global News, Winnipeg.
The RCMP announced it will not be laying charges following its probe into Alberta's 2017 United Conservative Party leadership race. The force says it found no evidence to support claims that Jeffrey Callaway entered the race solely to attend it and then of voter fraud.
The Alberta RCMP determined that there were suspected instances of potential fraud. However, there was insufficient evidence to charge any suspect.
The RCMP says those suspected instances of fraud were really rare and would not have affected the final outcome. Police also found no evidence that any candidate was involved. Canada has resumed funding the United Nations Relief and Works Agency in Gaza. Those funds were frozen following allegations some of its workers were involved in the Hamas attack on Israel. Ottawa says the money is needed to deliver humanitarian aid to civilians in Gaza. David Aiken joins us now. So, David, what was behind the government's decision here?
Well, Jeff, Canada has now reviewed an interim report, it's a report not yet made public, into allegations that UNRWA employees participated in the Hamas attacks of October 7th.
UNRWA is the backbone of the humanitarian response to the needs of Palestinian civilians in Gaza, while acknowledging the steps that have been taken both by UNRWA and by the larger UN to address some of the concerns that we've had.
But the decision to resume doing business with UNRWA is a controversial one, even within Hussein's own caucus. Liberal MPs Marco Mendicino and Anthony Housefather released a statement Thursday saying Canadian aid should indeed flow to suffering Palestinian civilians, but UNRWA should not deliver that aid.
UNRWA has had a long history of employees at UNRWA who have been involved in teaching anti-Semitic materials at schools, and misconduct amongst the senior executives.
Then also announced the Canadian military will help with airdrop programs operated by Jordan and the World Food Program. Ottawa will donate $100,000 and give Jordan's Air Force 300 parachutes. Now, while Canada had announced a pause in payments to UNRWA, it had not actually missed any payments. Canada's next scheduled payment is due in April, and that $25 million contribution will now proceed next month. Jeff?
David Aiken in Ottawa. Thanks, David. Aid groups are looking for new ways to deliver supplies to Gaza. The European Union just revealed a maritime corridor to deliver aid from Cyprus that could begin this weekend. It follows U.S. President Joe Biden's announcement last night that the U.S. will build a temporary pier on Gaza's Mediterranean coast. Crystal Gamanting reports on the plans and the pitfalls.
A Cypriot Rescue Coordination Center could soon be tracking aid shipments to Gaza, the 15-hour journey laid out for the President of the European Commission.
We are launching this Cyprus Maritime Corridor together. Cyprus, the European Union, the United Arab Emirates, and the United States.
The Cyprus Maritime Corridor aims at scaling up aid by complementing other routes that include the all-important Rafah crossing point.
Unlocking all possible routes to get aid into Gaza is the goal. Airdrops haven't eased the crisis, nor have land crossings. The materials are there, but the trucks aren't moving as needed, according to this video recorded by the head of the Norwegian Refugee Council.
The system is completely broken.
Shipments by sea could get huge quantities of aid to those in desperate need quickly. As part of his State of the Union address, the U.S. President announced the building of a temporary pier off the coast of Gaza.
That can receive large shipments, carrying food, water, medicine, and temporary shelters.
Israel welcomed the initiative, according to a statement by the spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but it stated the aid would move after security checks are carried out in accordance with Israeli standards. That could lead to similar backlogs like those at land crossings, and it will take time to build a pier.
I think it's a sign that the world knows just how desperate the situation has become in Gaza. But I also think it's a sign that they don't see a ceasefire is likely to happen soon.
With widespread hunger, especially in the north, President Biden called on Israel to do its part, saying aid must not be a secondary consideration or a bargaining chip. Crystal Gamanting, Global News, London.
TikTok. Coming up. Time may be running out for American users of the social media app. Well, this is the first for me as well. Not your typical traffic jam on Canada's busiest highway. Linen racks filled with uniforms littered Toronto's 401 after falling from a transport truck. The cleanup caused traffic chaos this afternoon. The driver of the truck was charged with having an insecure load. Washington wants to force the sale of TikTok, the popular video sharing app used by millions around the world. U.S. lawmakers have approved a bill that could push the Chinese owners of the app to sell or be banned in America. Jackson Prosco reports on the TikTok showdown.
Help us to keep TikTok alive in America by calling your congressman.
TikTokers suddenly have a lot to talk about.
Hi, I heard that you're trying to shut down TikTok.
Yes.
They've been bombarding members of Congress with angry phone calls at the social media giant's urging.
If I lose this, I literally will not be able to pay my rent.
The effort seems to have backfired. This week, lawmakers voted unanimously to advance a bipartisan bill that could ban the platform in the U.S.
This foreign interference and manipulation is not welcome here. The threats posed by TikTok are real.
The concern is over TikTok's Chinese parent company, ByteDance. There are fears that user data and a powerful tool for influence are controlled by the Chinese government. The proposed law would require ByteDance to sell off TikTok within 6 months or be banned from the U.S.
ByteDance is not owned or controlled by the Chinese government. It's a private company.
The U.S. and Canada have already banned TikTok from government devices over security concerns, but with 170 million users in the U.S. alone, a wider ban would be tricky politics, especially in an election year. President Joe Biden's campaign is on TikTok.
Jason Kelsey or Travis Kelsey?
Mama Kelsey. But he supports the proposed law.
If they pass it, I'll sign it.
Donald Trump, who tried to ban the app as president, is now campaigning against the legislation.
It's really become central to the social media landscape. And so if you lose TikTok, then, you lose access to a lot of creators.
The biggest concern comes from the platform's content creators and entrepreneurs who rely on TikTok's tremendous reach for their businesses.
TikTok has allowed me and my family to share our livelihoods with all of y'all.
Their influence may not be enough to overcome fears about China's possible control, even if the proposed ban faces a long road before actually becoming law. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
Still ahead, at risk of being erased, the growing fears for hundreds of Armenian heritage sites. Welcome back. An update now on the tensions and border crisis between Armenia and Azerbaijan. This week, Azerbaijan demolished the building that once housed the Armenian parliament of Nagorno-Karabakh. Azerbaijan recaptured the region last year, and more than 100,000 ethnic Armenians fled. The landlocked region has been the subject of a long-standing territorial dispute, and there are now growing concerns about what will happen to churches, graveyards, and other cultural sites. Redmond Shannon reports.
Ilham Aliyev won a fifth term as Azerbaijan's president in February with 92% of the vote, ignoring international observer concerns about voting irregularities. He called the election early after Azeri troops gained full control of Nagorno-Karabakh last September following partial gains in the short war of 2020. The final Azeri push resulted in more than 100,000 ethnic Armenians quickly fleeing to Armenia, among them former lawmaker Artak Beglarian.
The majority feel helpless in this chaotic situation.
Many refugees are concerned about what is happening to religious buildings and cultural sites in the land they left behind, a place known to Armenians as Artsakh.
And this is very concerning that there is no international monitoring mission in Artsakh, and Azerbaijan blocks any kind of access.
This video that aired on an Azeri YouTube channel in January shows apparently vandalized gravestones at an ethnic Armenian military graveyard. Global News has verified its location to be in a village that Azerbaijan captured last September. Armenian-American Christina Moranci is a professor of Armenian studies.
It's a form of terrorism, if you will, a form of psychological terrorism that does the job of distressing people who care about those sites like that cemetery.
The group Caucasus Heritage Watch at Cornell University in New York uses satellite images to document recent and historical damage to Armenian and Azeri cultural sites in different parts of the Caucasus region. Those researchers and Moranci say damage to Azeri sites over the years has been smaller compared to what they call state-sponsored campaigns of removal by Azerbaijan.
You can only predict the future based on the past, and if we look at the past and we look at past precedent, then we have to be worried that such erasure will happen again, and it is happening.
The Azerbaijani government did not respond to a Global News request for comment on alleged acts of damage and destruction in Nagorno-Karabakh since 2020. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Search efforts are underway in Nigeria for more than 280 school children abducted by armed gunmen in the country's northwest. Witnesses say the mass kidnapping happened after assailants stormed a school Thursday morning. At least one man was shot dead during the attack. Authorities say he tried to save the students, who are between 8 and 15 years old. No group has claimed responsibility, but abductions are common strategies for bandits seeking ransoms. It's Nigeria's second mass kidnapping in just a week after Islamic extremists kidnapped 200 people last Friday. Next, reclaiming culture. The indigenous filmmakers working to expose raw realities on this International Women's Day.
You know, you got a nice color scheme. What color would you say that is?
My color.
That was Leonardo DiCaprio and breakout star Lily Gladstone in Killers of the Flower Moon. Gladstone's role as an Osage woman in 1920s Oklahoma has earned her an Oscar nomination, making her the first Indigenous American woman to be nominated for the Lead Actress Academy Award. And tonight, we're taking a closer look at the powerful voices of Indigenous women in the Canadian film industry. As the world marks International Women's Day, a new film is making its debut across Canada, following two Inuit women as they work to reclaim their language and culture. Nithu Garcha has more on how the pair hopes to impact future generations.
It's a story that follows the journey of two Inuit women as they confront domestic violence and substance abuse and embark on a journey of healing.
The message to all the viewers is take time to listen, not to judge us right away, just because.
The film, called Tautuktivuk, delves into the raw realities of Inuit women in northern Canada.
There is help out there. Don't ever give up. There's always help.
The film tiptoes between truth and fiction with aspects drawn from their personal experiences.
Some conversations I had with my mother as a child, and some of it is based on what I saw.
She says the decision to incorporate both English and Inuktitut was crucial for reclaiming their culture, and it's resonating with fans like Debbie Corshane.
It was really softened for me because of the use of the language.
Corshane, an Anishinaabe comedian, says it's about reshaping narratives and ensuring stories are authentically represented on screen.
And it's so profound because so many times the story is told from the outside perspective, and so this time it's from the community itself.
She says she's inspired by the growing representation and success of Indigenous women like Lily Gladstone's historic Oscar nomination for Best Actress.
I was like, go Lily!
And Katerina Ziervogel's role in Marvel's Echo, elevating both her Indigenous and deaf cultures.
Part of the problem with when I was growing up, there were a lot of barriers, so I didn't have that strong sense of self.
As Tautuktivuk premieres across Canada on International Women's Day, the filmmakers hope their tales of truth help nurture a legacy of inclusion, healing, and hope for generations to come. Nithu Garcha, Global News, Vancouver.
And that is Global National for this Friday night. I'm Jeff Semple. Tonight's Your Canada is the Elbow River in Calgary. We love seeing your Canada, so please keep emailing your photos to viewers at globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Nithu will be at the anchor desk with you tomorrow. Have a great night.
Thank you for watching and privilege of your time. This is Amir Shakil 5858. I am Amir Woodman. Have a good life.